Hi everyone, good afternoon and thank you very much for joining us. My name's Jasmine Walk and I'll be introducing the session today. I've recently joined the Partnership Business Unit as the new business manager. So thanks very much everyone, thanks for joining, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what we're going to be doing today. So this week we've been focusing on children and young people's mental health, and today's session is going to be hearing in more detail about young people in Somerset's views and experiences on this subject. So we're really excited to be hearing from Joel Fowler, who's an elected member of Youth Parliament, and we'll also be hearing about the Public Health Schools Survey and a project which the Youth Forum has recently been doing around school attendance, and thinking about what these are telling us about children's experiences and priorities in Somerset. Then we'll also be hearing more about the school's mental health support team as well. So it's been a fantastic week that we've had so far, and I'll tell you a little bit about the sessions that have already been held. So on Monday, we had a follow-up session to our December forum theme, which was about engaging fathers and male carers more effectively. And Monday's session also detailed some more background information about the subject for this forum week and children and young people's mental health. And then on Tuesday, we heard from a number of different support services for children and young people in Somerset. And we heard more about the work that they're doing and the current projects that are in the area, and new ones that are being set up as well. So if you missed out on either Monday or Tuesday's session and would be interested in finding out more, these will be uploaded to our website for you to watch or share with colleagues moving forwards. Okay, in which case I will hand you over to Steve, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the session today.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jasmine. And yeah, we've got a busy day for you this afternoon. We've got lots to pack in, and yeah, lots of really exciting guests to come and talk to us about some of the work they've been doing this afternoon. Now, as Jasmine mentioned just now, we've been running a whole series of webinars throughout this week. We've got one more to go tomorrow, but we really want to make sure that these are interactive, and it's great about sort of disseminating information, but actually this needs to be a two-way process, and we need to get from you your ideas, your views, your opinions, because that's very much going to feed into the work to help improve access to services for children and young people's mental health. So just quickly before we go into it, in terms of this webinar, the webinar is being recorded, and after this week, we'll try and edit it and get up online as quickly as we can. Possibly might be the week after, but you'll find the recording for this session and all the previous sessions and tomorrow's session up on our forum page of our website, which we'll post a link for later on in the webinar here. In terms of interaction today, we have turned off disabled cameras and microphones. It's not that we don't want to hear from you, we really do. We just want to kind of prevent any disruption coming in throughout the webinar. So if you have got any questions to ask, please do ask them. Don't sit in silence, because we really want to hear from you. And if you've got any questions, if I could just ask you to pop it into the chat function in Teams here. If you're not used to it, it's the little speech bubble. Pop any questions in chat there. And if we have time at the end of each presentation, I'll kind of pick out some of those key questions for the presenters. If we haven't though, the presenters have said that they will spend some time after their presentation popping the answers to those in the chat if we can. Also, in terms of any chat that does go on in the chat function there, we will try and capture that, extract it and capture that and put that in to the presentation online when it's available for you. So building on that, we do want to hear from you, and it's time to grab your mobile phone, your iPad, your internet-enabled device, as they say fancily on TV, and go to www.menti.com. If you've got a I can't even speak this afternoon. QR code scanner on your phone, just bring that up and you can scan that code. That will take you straight into the Menti. If not, go to menti.com and just input the code you can see there. And my colleagues pop that into the chat function for you as well. And we will come back to that. And if you want to catch up on what the code is, it is in the chat function for you. If you log into that now, we're going to be having some Mentis as we run throughout this webinar for you. So if you log in now, stay logged in and until the end of the webinar. And that way, as things pop up, it will just make it a lot quicker and easier as we go along. So without further ado, then, it's time to press on with the content of what we're going to be talking about today. And as Jasmine mentioned earlier, today is very much about listening to the voices of children and young people. What are children and young people telling us about services to support their mental health and about what their mental health needs are? So to start us off this afternoon, we've got Joel who's going to join us now from Somerset Youth Parliament to talk about some of the work that he's been doing in this area. So Joel, if it's okay, I will hand over to you.
Oh, yeah, thank you very much. Hiya. Yeah, I'm Joel. I'm an elected member of Youth Parliament, and so over the next couple of years, I'm going to be running a campaign on mental health and wellbeing. So I want to start with who am I? Tell you a brief bit about myself. So yeah, like I said, I'm Joel Fowler. I'm 17 years old. In April, I was elected as a member of Youth Parliament, and previously I was a deputy member. I've always, throughout the time that I've been in Youth Parliament, my sort of passion has been mental health support, like mental health support for young people. So yeah, I have a strong passion for improving the mental health support for young people, and I'm also a Year 12 student studying at Richard Hewis College. So before I go on and talk about my campaign, I kind of wanted to hear from you. So hopefully you've got Menti up. If we go on Menti, there should be a question for you there. Just give you a second to get that up. Yeah, so who do you help? I see some people have already filled it out. Yep, so children and young people. I'm sure that's going to be quite a common theme. Anyone regardless of age needs advice or signposting for health social, all ages. So yeah, I was going to ask sort of what service do you belong to, but I thought it would be more interesting to ask who do you help? Slightly more getting you thinking. Students from age 3 to 18, young people, a lot of young people, good to see. Yeah, could we go to the next question, please? So what do you do to look after your own mental health? So this would be quite an interesting question to ask, because I think, there'd be a lot of people here who are so focused on sort of helping other people's mental health. Obviously that can build up. So I was thinking, what do you do to help your own mental health? Good sleep, paddleball. I love paddleboarding. I occasionally when I go to my dad's house, lives in Dorset, I do paddleboarding, but to be honest, my balance is slightly lacking. Creative, good sleep, yeah. Walking, exercise. Yeah, no, exercise is definitely a good one. I think. I mean, it's whenever I actually do some exercise, it always amazes me how good it actually makes me feel. Yeah, thank you. Can we go to the last question, please? So, what does your organisation do to support people with their mental health? Or does it, and if yes, how? So it's a sort of flip of the previous question. Sure, this one is probably a bit more complex to answer. Commissioning mental health services for children and young people. Work with schools. That's good. That's pastoral learning mentors. Yeah, it's interesting. The digital support. Emotion. Yeah, I've heard a lot about that. It's very interesting. Support online, being aware of changes in mood and behaviours. Right tools for signposting. Group therapy, interesting. Yeah, no, thank you. Oh, still going. Emotion coaching, awareness days. Interesting, lots of good stuff going on. Very good. Very good to see. Yeah, I think if that's it, then we can move on. So yeah, now I want to talk about the campaign beliefs. So this is the sort of thing that I did first when thinking about my campaign, before I thought of any objectives or anything like that. Just sort of the beliefs of the campaign. I'll start with the first one. It's pretty much a simple one. So all young people should have access to mental health support. Then we've got all young people should have the opportunity to talk to someone about their mental health. No one's thoughts should be neglected or disregarded. Teachers should have sufficient training and support to deal with students' mental health. All young people should have an understanding of mental health conditions, and no one should feel ashamed about their mental health. So why focus on schools? You can see there's quite a big emphasis on schools, and it sort of is the main focus of my campaign, really. So over the last sort of year that I've been part of Youth Parliament, I've talked to a lot of people, and I've heard a lot of stories about mental health support in schools, and I'm just going to tell a couple of them to you now. There's only sort of two out of many I've heard, and I've changed the names of these people for obvious reasons. So first, I want to talk about Ava. So a couple of months ago, Ava was having some quite severe body image issues. She was having quite a lot of panic attacks about the way that she looked and how she was perceiving, how she thought other people were looking at her. This was sort of starting to interfere with her school and her lessons. And some of the teachers did actually pick up on this, especially when she was having the sort of panic attacks in class. So she was sent to the student welfare people. And when she was there, she was talking to a mental health support worker. And she was actually told, and this is a quote, if you don't like the way you look, you should just go on a diet. I think we'd all agree that's, it's not really at all the right thing to say. And she was telling me how this actually made things, she said, 10 times worse. So she was having more panic attacks. And the other thing that she was encountering is that quite a lot, they were sending her back to class in the middle of her panic attacks. So that's just one story that I heard. Another one is a girl, Izzy. And Izzy has an eating disorder, or she did have an eating disorder. Sort of like Ava, this was starting to affect her in school. But with this, she decided herself to finally open up to the school. But she asked if they could not tell her parents because she didn't want her parents knowing about it. The school did immediately contact her parents, which she wasn't. I mean, she was obviously annoyed about it, but she could see that there was probably a reason there. But what I think is really bad is every lunch they would take her into this room, take her away from her friends and make her go, and they'd weigh her, and she'd see how much she weighed. And as you can see, this only made the problem worse for her. It made her more conscious of her body, more conscious of what she was eating. So yeah, it only made things a lot worse. So that's why I focus on schools. But what I would like to move on to is that I'm not blaming teachers, because I really don't want it to sound like I'm blaming teachers, because it's not their fault. Like I wrote here, teachers have to act as doctors, counsellors, mediators, and much more of that. And they have to, on top of that, provide an education. We really cannot expect teachers to do all of this and to sort of deal with students' mental health without the proper training. So I've just got a video here from Matt Nolan, who is sort of safeguarding and like mental health lead in my college, Richard Hughes College, and he's just going to talk a little bit about sort of what it's like for teachers. So if we just play that video now, please.
Hello, my name's Matt Nolan at Richard Hughes College in Taunton. I'm the designated safeguarding lead and the Director of Student Services here at the college. Mental health has been a big thing for us, especially coming out the back of pandemic. We've seen a large increase in students. That's nearly a 50% increase of students who are struggling with their own mental health. That's for a variety of reasons. The main reasons we find are to do with being in large groups, anxieties, worries, stress of sitting exams because they've not done those before, and just generally being in a campus where there will be lots and lots of students in small areas. We've seen a rise in anxiety, panic attacks, self-harm, suicidal thoughts. All these things are affecting our students who are 16 to 19 years old. We do have a trained team of staff at college who've gone through mental health first aid training and have raised awareness around mental health across the college and can also support students on a one-to-one basis. However, unfortunately, that is not enough. We do have examples when students will struggle in the classroom. We've had self-harm in the classroom. We've had suicidal attempts on college site. And member staff, teaching staff, cleaners, kitchen staff, caretakers, support staff, all having to deal with these students and the support needs that they've got. Unfortunately, it's not always possible, and it is really, really difficult to prioritise and decide how we best support students. We'd love to train our staff better. We'd love to be able to give them more understanding and a general knowledge about mental health. In particular, prevention. How can we support those students who are doing okay at the moment, but may tip into having poor mental health? Or may come across a situation where things become difficult. A family member passes away. They have financial difficulty at home. Or they just struggle from day to day. How can we support those students so they don't tip into a mental health arena where they do need one-to-one care, or worse, they need clinical support? We need to ensure that teachers are trained effectively and appropriately so that they can work with all students and understand mental health.
Yeah, so that was Matt, and yeah, thank you to him for making that video for me. So yeah, to reiterate, I really am not blaming the teachers. I think, you know, it's just more training is needed. So now I'm going to sort of move on to so the objectives. So I've just sort of explained why I focused on schools, and now these are the objectives that I've come up with that I plan on achieving over the next couple of years. And they're sort of in order of how I'm going to do them. So the first one is going to be to consult with young people on mental health support in schools plus colleges and how it can be improved. And I've wrote some examples there of just how it's going to be done for social surveys, focus groups, and friends with personal experiences. I think it's really important to get sort of a mix of data, so get lots of statistics, but also sort of quotes and stuff. The main reason for doing this really is to give me some evidence really to back me. You know, it's all good and well me coming and saying these things, but you know, having some actual evidence, and I think everyone believes it, but yeah, having the data there really is going to help support everything I do. So moving on for the next objective, after I've consulted with young people, I'm going to produce a report on my findings and then circulate this to schools plus colleges. So this is, once again, it will help back me. I can say, you know, here's this report, but also I think if there's any schools plus colleges who want to do more but are sort of undecided whether they should, you know, once they see this report, can really sort of help them push to do more. This is obviously only the start. So the next objective is so it's going to be to consult with teachers and mental health professionals on the training and knowledge teachers have on mental health and how to deal with students' mental health. And I think this is probably going to be the hardest objective to do, because I think, as we all know, teachers are incredibly busy, especially at the moment. So actually trying to get them to have the time to speak to me is going to be difficult, but you know, we'll do it. So yeah, this is very important because, like I say, my whole campaign really is about the training that teachers have. So I need to hear from them really what training they have, and how it can be improved. So after that, this is sort of the main thing of my campaign really. To be the start of my campaign. It's going to be to create a teacher training course, obviously with helpful mental health professionals, because I definitely can't do that all on my own, and to improve the knowledge and actions of teachers towards students' mental health. And this training course will obviously include the statistics from the consultation, and then ways they can improve how they interact with students, and ways how the schools and colleges as a whole can improve the mental health support. So the next objective is how am I going to get this to teachers? So I think it would be impossible for me to go around and show this to all teachers. So my plan really is going to be to present this teacher training course sort of to head teachers and other senior people in the education sector, to encourage them to provide it to their own staff. So this can be done through attending head teacher conferences, sort of sending it as an email, which it doesn't always work, to be honest, and then sort of members of the youth parliament advisory group, which could help me take to their schools, to colleges. So previously, I've actually, in my previous role as a deputy member of youth parliament, I did attend one of these head teacher conferences, and I think that'd be sort of the best place really to present the training and encourage head teachers to give to their own staff, because the whole point of this really is to help them out, you know. So hopefully, and it's obviously all free, so hopefully they'll take it. So next is sort of another big thing in my campaign, or working towards that. It's going to be to consult with mental health professionals and create a booklet on the common mental health conditions and like symptoms, etc. So I think quite a big problem with young people is they don't understand sort of the common mental health conditions. They don't understand what they're feeling, and there's quite a lot of information out there, but there's quite a lot of different information, some of it contradicting. So I think it would be really good to have this sort of booklet which says it all. And I think if we go to the next objective, it's going to promote and share this booklet on the common mental health conditions. And look, I quite like a printed version and an online version. So this is just a place that hopefully all young people in Somerset will know they can go to this booklet, sort of read about the common mental health conditions, you know, see how they're feeling and sort of just help them really. And the last objective, which is I say last, but this is going to be done throughout the campaign. It's going to be to promote positive attitudes towards mental health, and this can be done through flyers, posters, social media, and people's stories. I think quite a big problem, obviously, is the attitude towards mental health. Some people have a really negative attitude. They don't want to talk about it, they want to hide it, or they want to hide it. So I think a really big part of this campaign is going to be to promote these positive attitudes, to tell people, you know, it's okay to talk about it and to get help. So that is everything from me. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll answer them. And next up, we're going to watch a video on the by the Health and Wellbeing Framework, which is the pupil participation tool. And if you haven't had enough of my face is quite prevalent in this video.
Brilliant, thank you, Joel. Actually, just before we watch the video, if it's okay, we've had lots of comments in the chat about training in general, which is great to see. One specific question I'm just wondering if you might be able to ask them is just about whether there's going to be any links with independent schools. Joe's saying, writing a training program for my school, we'd be really happy to talk to you directly about how this has worked within our school. That's a possibility. I can obviously kind of provide you with contact details if you like that.
Yeah, no, definitely, and that would be really brilliant. I mean, the idea is that I would like to get to all schools across Somerset. You know, it's not you know, any school across Somerset can get this, and the more people who help me with it, obviously, the better. And I'm really open to, you know, cooperating with schools who may be creating their own one, to sort of help them see what they've done. They can see what I'm doing. Yeah, I'm really open to that.
Brilliant, thanks, Joel. And not so much a question, but we've just got a thing in the chat about young listeners who may be able to help support you with that. We've got some contact details in the chat for you as well, so it might be something for you to tap into as well. So brilliant.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent, lovely. Thank you for that, Joel. I may have missed something in chat, so it might be worth having a quick skim in just a moment.
Yeah,
if that's okay. But thank you so much. That was really really inspiring, and I think really kind of tangible, something that can be taken forward to kind of really help support schools to support children and young people's mental health. So brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Right. Well, as Joel said, we're going to watch a video now, and just last for a few minutes here. So hopefully you should hear sound, but if not, please do let me know.
Joel Fowler, and I'm part of a student voice group supporting a local research project for mental health and wellbeing in schools and colleges run by Public Health. Our focus was pupil participation within the Public Health Wellbeing Framework tool. The aim is to identify key issues around student voice and wellbeing, share good practice, and make recommendations for a toolkit that schools can use to develop student voice. While students undergo so many pressures from themselves, from parents and from teachers to do well in exams, and to do well in their education so they can progress in life. As well as this, nowadays there is so much pressure from social media on the way to look and act, and it really can have an effect on especially students. So it's really important that students have support in their mental health and they know who to go to talk to. Well, student voice matters because at the end of the day, the people who are going to know the issues that are facing students more is going to be that student. We are also the future generations to come, so we should get a say in what happens to our future. Well, the same sort of thing really, and especially with mental health. No one knows what is going on inside your head, even other people your age, but especially sort of people who've never experienced social media as students like this. So it's really important that students do actually have a say on the wellbeing plan for them, because otherwise, you know, obviously they know how they're going to be supported best.
Hi, I'm Mimi, and I was part of the student voice group for Hannah's project. I come from the Castle School where I was a senior student, and I worked really closely with the head of mental health. Over the past couple of months, I've learned so many things, but the main thing I've learned is how important it is for us to get rid of the stigma that we hold around young people's mental health. YMCA did a survey with 2,000 students and found that more than 1 in 3 students had felt some kind of negative impact due to stigma around their mental disorder. It is so easy for a student to feel guilt, shame, and bottle things up because there's a lack of support and awareness around mental health. By having these experiences so early in life, a person can feel that their whole lifetime that seeking help is weak. Without a good well-being and a good state of mind, a student can't even think twice about academic success, as it really is the base for everything. I think groups and projects like these can really help to move forward and really help to disband the stigma.
This toolkit includes recommendations and resources on how schools can better support and empower pupil participation, so students can have influence over well-being within their school or college.
So moving on then, just to introduce Jamila to you, who is now going to talk to us about the survey that went out a little while ago, really listening to the voices of children and young people from across Somerset and taking part in the school survey. So Jamila, is it okay if I hand over to you now then?
Yeah, that certainly is. So, welcome everyone. My name's Jamila Ingram. I work in the public health team, and I support settings, educational settings around wellbeing. And I'm here today to talk about the school survey. So I just wanted to thank Joel really for setting the context, and I think it's quite heartening to see his mandate really, because that's something that we've been really passionate about in public health in terms of CPD for schools and developing that whole school approach. So I look forward to collaborating with you, Joel, after today. So thank you very much for setting the context for this afternoon. And so I'm here today to talk to you about our school's wellbeing survey. We have been really passionate about including the young people's voice in all of our commissioning and making it the heart of all of our planning and development in our services. And so we have actually been doing a school survey since 2014, but it was commissioned outside previously to the school's health education unit. So it's the first time that it came into public health, and then we've developed our own evidence-based survey. And so that took place in the summer term of last year. So if we can take our cast our minds back, we sort of coming out of a pandemic, and for the last part of the summer term, that's when children were back in full-time education, and so that's when the survey took place. And it was really important time because children had been, as we all had, in a lockdown experience, and had little engagement with their peers or with the wider community. So to be able to ask them about their sort of attitudes and behaviours around their emotional health and well-being and their lifestyle was a really key piece of work, really, to help inform how we are going to support young people moving forward. And so the survey was an online survey, and we surveyed almost a third of our schools across the county. And most of the survey was quantitative, but we also did allow an opportunity for children to post any sort of comments or anything that they felt was important to them. And actually, we were flooded with storytelling because, as I mentioned before, we were coming out of a pandemic and no one had really at that point engaged with what it felt like to be a young person coming out of a lockdown experience. So it's been a really rich and valuable piece of work to be involved in terms of understanding what the needs of young people are. And so alongside the survey, we also had protocols and processes in place regarding safeguarding, as we were conscious that it was a very challenging time in life. And so although the survey was anonymous, we invited schools to keep a register of children, identifying them with a unique ID. So we weren't able to know who they were, but if any child was presenting to be vulnerable or at risk, we were able to support them. So there's a separate piece of work, which I won't be presenting on today, but that looks at what the safeguarding issues were around the young people that were identified in our survey. So we were able to do that follow-up support for anyone who presented with any vulnerabilities. So a pretty robust survey in that respect as well. And so the findings from the survey get used in all of our commissioning and planning, and this just really sets the scene in terms of who got involved. So we had 64 of our primaries, 23 of our secondaries, 3 special schools, and we also had PRUs involved. And so what we saw roughly was, positively an even split between our primary and secondary engagement. We've reported here we had 8,434 responses that we published on. We actually had a much higher proportion of participation in the survey, because what we did was we invited schools to survey on any of the year groups they wanted to survey on, but we only published on the even year group. So in fact, we actually had 10,000 responses, but for the benefit of today's presentation and for published data, we've actually only reported on just sort of shy of 8,500. And it was the first time ever actually that we also surveyed Key Stage 1, and that felt really important because we're a rural community with lots of infant schools, so we wanted to capture as many young people as we could, really. So we'll just move on to look at some of the demographics of our young people. So as I mentioned before, we had roughly an even split between boys and girls. We had 330 young people who preferred not to identify their gender or didn't answer the question, and 973 who identified that they had a different ethnicity to white. 621 children identified as young carers, and 1,035 young children identified as LGBTQ or plus. We had 283 SEND pupils that were in the primary schools and 592 secondary pupils. So we had a really good diverse sample within our data, and we're going to explore now what that meant for the different groups and why it's really important that we look at targeting our services. And so we'll look first of all at the primary data. So interestingly enough, what we found in the survey was that boys reported that they worried less than girls, but their experience of school was less enjoyable than girls of the same age, and that where children weren't able to or preferred not to identify their gender, there was an issue around their vulnerability in most of the factors of the questions that we asked in the survey around emotional health and well-being and safety in relationships. So we asked children about whether they felt safe in their community, at school, in the park, and at home. And interestingly enough, those children that weren't able to identify or chose not to identify their gender didn't feel safe at school, and certainly had the highest levels of anxiety and worry compared to their peers. There was less bullying amongst primary age boys compared to girls. And again, children who didn't identify their gender felt that they had less sort of resilience and self-esteem. So they felt more pressurized into doing things they didn't want to do, and had higher incidences of bullying in that group. They also felt that the school community cared about them less and was less interested in their opinions and ideas. So we'll just move on, please. And then we looked at ethnicity. And so these slides really speak to the fact that school life is really different for different people. And so, we have a commitment to make sure that everyone is seen, valued and heard. So how do we make it a positive outcome for our whole school community? So those that identified that they weren't white had highest rates of worry around family and health problems. They were significantly more bullied than their peers, particularly around the way they looked and their faith, and they didn't enjoy school as much. Young carers, again, had significantly higher levels of worry compared to their peers. When they have a problem, they feel much more isolated and feel they have to deal with it alone. And they also felt significantly less safe in the settings I just mentioned, so in the park, home, neighbourhood and wider community, and they were more likely to be bullied. In our secondary data, we saw that, again, that boys worried less than girls, but they felt safer, in the community at home and in school. They had less rates of, they were least likely to be bullied compared to girls, and they enjoyed school more, and they felt that the school did care about them and their opinions. Whereas for girls, this was different, that they had higher levels of worry. They were more likely to be bullied, and school experience was less positive. Children at secondary age level who preferred not to identify their gender, again, it was a trend where they felt, again, significantly less safe. There were higher rates of bullying, and school enjoyment was a lot significantly lower compared to their peers. And again, they felt that the school cared about them less. And this was the same as we saw in children who identified as LGBTQ and plus. And I have to say, I've been involved in the survey now. I've been with the council for about 5 years, and we have seen, particularly around young carers and children who are identified as LGBTQ plus, that their health and well-being outcomes have always reported poorer than their peers. And so there's something that we can be doing as a county to make sure that we look at children who are presenting more vulnerable, and what can we do differently to improve that for these groups of young people. And again, we saw that the issues were the same as children got older in secondary. Around for carers, it was also, they had higher rates of bullying and felt less safe. So we asked children to rate and categorise what they worried about the most, and we've seen consistent trends really in since the survey's been going. Some of these really aren't surprising. So schoolwork and exams are always in the top 5 of biggest worries for young people, and particularly coming out of a pandemic, it was an issue because there was an awful lot of pressure on young people and staff for teachers around a catch-up curriculum, and so that really impacted on the emotional health and well-being of young people. What's interesting in this table, it speaks to the fact that at a primary age we start to see that children were much more mindful about their physical health. So we didn't have that in the past in previous surveys. So the pandemic had impacted on worries in relationship to your physical health for primary age children. Less so for secondary. We started to see that more around emotional health. But there's a strong narrative throughout the whole survey around body positivity and appearance. So it was really interesting that when Joel started his presentation this afternoon with his case studies, I can totally back that up on a county-wide level, that appearance and challenges around the way you look is a real concern for young people, and it affects their ability to thrive and be resilient in school. And we can explore that data. We can explore that further as we move into the survey. And then for the older ones, there's an issue around the future. So, that transitioning, whether you go on to further education or into the workplace, is a real concern for year 10s. Okay, so if we can then look at the coping strategies. So what's really interesting in this slide is it speaks to the fact that the younger children felt that they were more likely to engage either with a sibling, a parent, or a teacher, a person effectively, if they had a problem, and talk to someone about it. As children are getting older, they're less likely to do that. And we started to see a trend where young people are internalizing their problems. And so what we saw with the survey is kind of this zoning out, whether it be through Netflix or your mobile phone, but actually technology was actually a coping strategy for young people. So if we're trying to encourage young people to be off technology, we just need to be mindful of the fact for some young people, actually game playing or whatever is actually a means of them being able to cope, because they aren't seeking help from other people. So it's a balance really when we want them to be on technology less. So it's really kind of an important message, and a concern that young people are internalizing and keeping a lot of problems to themselves and not feeling they can share. Okay, so if we could move on to look at the resilience with young people. So what these bar charts speak to is the fact that actually as children get older, they felt less resilient in Somerset. So they felt less empowered in school to be able to make choices and decisions in how things and make a difference in school compared to their primary peers. And again, what we start to see around self-esteem. So that with secondary age pupils, they were less likely to feel empowered to be able to problem solve and have the confidence to do things well and to try new things. So it's just an important message on how, when we support young people, when we're building that great foundation at primary around creating a nurturing environment to build confidence and self-esteem, how do we then support that through to secondary when they transition? Okay. And then we started to look at sort of empathy and being able to, so those really important skills in terms of, building positive mental health. So we start to see that, again, primary school children reported that they felt that they had stronger a sense of empathy compared to their secondary peers. And they were sort of more engaged and more mindful and aware of how others felt. And interestingly enough, in the data, when we started to break it down and look at specific groups, it was even stronger for children who identified as SEND, so SEND pupils. They had much higher levels of empathy and concern for their peers compared to the wider sample. And then we start to see changes in sort of the anxiety that we start seeing the older ones around challenges around the future and feeling able to go on and be successful in the future. So there's an action for us there about these key transition points of how we prepare young people for moving between settings but then on to adulthood. Okay, so if we can just look now at the RSHE curriculum. So relationships, sex and health education is a mandated subject that was mandated in law in 2019. And all schools have to treat it as a curriculum subject. So it can't just be like a drop-down day that you cover. They have to have dedicated time. And so we surveyed our young people to see how they felt, because this is a personal development curriculum. This is the one opportunity, not the only opportunity, but one of the most important opportunities in a school day where you can actually work on building in some of these key life skills. So around, emotional health and well-being, relationship building, enabling children to have that sense of belonging and connection and inclusion. So we asked our young people what lessons they were finding most useful. And so we know that there was a whole push in school around, cleanliness and hygiene. That was partly to do with the pandemic. So positively, we saw that primary school children, rated that because that was probably more in their consciousness at that time. But also more positively was that, primary schools where it's mandated to teach relationships education had really, invested a lot of time on that. And so young people said that they felt the lessons around friendship, around respecting different people, about keeping your body safe, around consent were really important. So that's really great to hear, really, that, the primary schools have really embraced that, and that young people are finding that really useful. And again, we start to see in those top 10 mental health as well. So it's good that it's being formed as part of the curriculum, and schools are doing it really well. And then if we move on to look at the secondary pupils, we will see that, again, there was a big push around online safety. So obviously there's a lot of homeschooling during that time. And interestingly enough, what's not on this slide is it speaks to the vulnerability of young people around communicating in a digital world. So we had 49% of primary school age children and 59% of secondary age children that said they didn't feel safe online. So that's still, half of our population not feeling confident. So it's great to see that schools are looking to address that, but it's also, we make an assumption that whilst children are confident in terms of, or choosing to communicate digitally, actually in terms of safety, they're still not feeling safe, and there's a high vulnerability factor. Again, positively, we started to see that schools are embracing looking at inclusion more, although there's a lot more we can be doing in Somerset in terms of celebrating difference, because we're a large county. And we're a very diverse community, but some communities that's not reflected in. And so how do we make the effort to celebrate that in all communities? And, we're starting to see positively around the curriculum being taught around harm minimization and safety in terms of drugs and alcohol education, and the importance of, valuing relationships and friendships. So and sex education also appearing there. So it's, I think there's more that can be done, particularly around the sexual safety of young people in terms of RSHE curriculum development. I think that came out in the survey that we would like to see more of that, particularly around consent, keeping our bodies safe in the secondary age. That seemed to be less evident in this survey. So we move on. And this just looks at some of the other subjects that were being taught. Of what your people are finding useful. So I encourage secondaries to really embrace the opportunity of carrying on with the RSHE, because it is that opportunity for young people. We know that certainly, you know, as in Joel's presentation, a lot of children transitioned when at a very sort of early developmental stage. So children were leaving school at 14, transitioning to primary without having any of that sort of puberty education. So there were big gaps in RSHE education. So, you know, one of the things we advocate in Mandate is that to revisit these things. So, you know, it's about layering it up in terms of depth for the different ages and key stages, but that to revisit subjects, because so many children transition to settings without that foundation knowledge. And so we're working with schools to support them in terms of curriculum development. And one of the key pieces of work that Joe mentioned that he's doing, so I look forward to collaborating with him after this, is that we commission an organisation to LifeBit, and we actually did a pilot with a set of schools this year. We just finished it last week, around how you create a mental health and wellbeing curriculum in schools. And so we'll be repeating that in the autumn. So it'd be good to work with Joel and how we can do that for schools. So we had some really positive feedback on that. So yes, there's lots more we can be doing around sexual safety in secondary. And so this is really just looking at issues around bullying. And I think what was really interesting this time, and, you know, obviously I've been involved in the survey for some time now looking at trends, is that we saw a higher prevalence of bullying in primary compared to secondary. So that it's normally the other way round. And what's more interesting is the fact that children were actually in school for that for a long period of time. So, you know, a quarter of primary school pupils and 18% of secondary school pupils said they've been bullied in the last school year. So in that last part of that term. So it feels like there's lots more we can do around celebrating difference and inclusion, really. And then in terms of feeling, how well does your school deal with it? 13% of primary school children said not very well, and 6% said not at all. And secondary, it was higher. So there's less satisfaction in terms of how things were being dealt with. And interestingly enough, I was just doing a training, senior mental health leads training with schools last week, and we discussed this in detail. And I think, you know, some of the schools are saying that actually it's that they have lots of policies and protocols in place, but that's not necessarily communicated. So when they went back and talked to their young people about it, wasn't that the issue wasn't dealt with, it's just they didn't know how to seek help. So how can schools be better about communicating that to their pupils? Okay, so we'll look now around, and this is the important slide about looking about why you think you're being bullied. So we already know from the previous slide that particular groups, particularly around your ethnicity, you are more likely to be bullied around your appearance. And interestingly enough, this slide speaks to the fact that when the children were asked why they thought they were being bullied, it was all mostly largely to do with things they couldn't change, so i.e. about their physical selves. And so I urge schools to pick up on Joel's presentation to do a lot more work around body positivity and how we celebrate our bodies and our individual selves. And so on our website, there's details at the end. We have done a piece of work, a creative piece of work with LifeBeat. There are some lesson plans, and it's all out there around body positivity. But I didn't see that appear in the curriculum teaching of last year, and yet it's something that as children as young as 6, it becomes one of their top 5 worries about how they look, and that increases with age, and then it becomes something that they feel that they're being bullied about. So I think as a county, we could be doing certainly more to celebrate our own selves in that way. Okay. This is looking at satisfaction in the school. So we've already talked largely to that. It's just saying really that on the whole, primary school, well, in this survey, primary school children enjoyed school more than their peers. So its satisfaction decreases with age, really, and that primary school children felt more safe in school compared to their peers, and generally behaviour was seen more positively in school, in primary school than their peers. Okay. If we could move on. We've had a sort of Lovely. Okay. And this is really sort of highlighting what I said earlier. So positively, we're starting to see schools really take the whole school approach. So one of the things we weren't able to show was around the Somerset Wellbeing Framework work that we've been working with Kate Darlington and her team on. But that schools are really embracing how they can look for those whole school opportunities. So again, particularly in primary, there's a lot of work being done about improving that emotional literacy and vocabulary. And we would like to see that being expanded really in secondary. So, you know, there are lots of opportunities now that schools have created around zone regulating, emotion coaching, a whole host of different things around being able to identify and speak to your emotional health. But that needs to be accessible in secondary in the same way, really. And then this last bar chart looks at the fact that, you know, at primary, a higher proportion of primary school children reported that their school encourages them to sort of celebrate difference, really. So what can we do more at secondary? So if we can carry on. And so again, the survey showed that children felt more empowered at primary level to contribute to and be more advocates in school than secondary, and to be able to make a difference. And they felt that they were more engaged with teaching staff than their secondary peers. So, and there's more work we can be doing, as I said, around that transition and preparing young people for when they transition out of school. So there was a concern that for secondary particularly didn't feel well equipped when they were leaving school around the future. Okay. So what we saw, both quantitatively and qualitatively, that we know that, you know, coming out of the lockdown, hopefully this year, you know, we're starting to see school trips and social activities, you know, come back for young people. But it was a really challenged time in terms of emotional health and well-being, because not only, you know, was there a lot of home learning, which young people found really challenging, and it affected their emotional health. That the fact that there was a lack of social opportunities anyway to engage with peers, and so that affected confidence levels. There's an issue around sort of community safety that we can be looking at around, you know, how young people feel safe in open spaces and communal spaces. So that came out strongly in the survey. We know that, you know, there has been an increase in drug use, so there's an issue therefore around coping strategies and how we support young people to have healthy coping strategies when they're dealing with stresses and worries. We've started to see as a concern in our FE settings an increase in teenage pregnancy. So there's more work we can be doing with our sexual health services and with educational settings, as I said, around sexual safety and the and being able to say no. So that's come through our sexual health services. A lot of young people feeling very pressurized, particularly girls, around having to have sex when they're not ready. Young people are still struggling to see with the catch-up curriculum, and so in FE settings we saw children wanting to sort of drop out earlier in the academic year than perhaps would have been predicted, because they've, like a lot of children, found that transition, that settling in phase really hard, because they left school perhaps, you know, when they were 14 and then suddenly put into a very different culture and environment. And so that has been a challenge about how we do really longer inductions for young people and to support them into transitioning and settling into new settings. And we're still seeing in the county the challenge of number of children who have found, you know, school refusers, what we call children and young people finding it hard to settle back into a full-time school routine. Okay. On the positive note, because we have been working hard in the background, so where there has been challenge to, you know, focus on the positive. So on the whole, we have been supporting schools around their RSHE curriculum, and we have some fantastic examples of schools that have really embraced that, and certainly secondaries, you know, it's not all doom and gloom, that have developed post-COVID recovery wellbeing curriculums and added it into their key school curriculum. So there's some excellent work out there. We're working in the Mendip area with Selwood Academy to develop an RSHE curriculum that looks at a holistic model of well-being and how that can be translated across a whole school. So that will be coming out, and be able to share that with schools. We're piloting now a wellbeing survey with Yeovil College, which we hope to roll out to all FE settings. So the next survey will take place in March 2023. So we do it biennially. So we'll have the so schools will be able to engage that, and it's a free survey. So if you're linked to or know a school, do encourage them to get involved, because it's found an invaluable piece of work, really. And this year we have been working. So part of the Somerset Wellbeing Framework is as part of a whole school approach to celebrate wellbeing, we advocate that schools focus on 3 key pillars. So that's the pillar of belonging, which includes inclusion, safety, purpose, connection, community, relationships, looking at relationship with the self, others, and the wider world, and lifestyle, looking at diet, physical activity, and sleep, but physical activity also in terms of relaxation and breath, rather than just about sort of cardiovascular exercise. And so we've been inviting schools to take part in an arts project to celebrate those pillars creatively, and we have some fantastic pieces of work which we're going to be celebrating in the autumn term with an exhibition of all the work the schools have done. So it's been a really wonderful legacy of coming out of the pandemic, because what we wanted to do was honour the endings and beginnings of things, because that's particularly, you know, losses, those transitions were a challenge for us all, and particularly in school. And so the arts project was there to bring school community together, and to look at how you can honour what is a transition out of a pandemic back into the world. So I'm look forward to sharing that with you next year, or next academic year. I work and commission LifeBeat to deliver our RSHE training. So they have experience in developing personal development plans for young people, and use creativity at the heart of their facilitation and teaching. And so we are delighted that we have another annual summer camp for 14 to 18-year-olds. So anyone who kind of wants to build their self-esteem and resilience, we help young people drop back into their heart, find themselves. So really diverse community of young people. And we've got another camp which is free for 50 young people to come together and take part this summer. We have a youth leadership day coming up on this Sunday in Frome. So one of the pieces of work that we do with LifeBeat is around, again, things being youth-led. So as Joel said, you know, young people are our future, and it's really important that we are guided by the needs and of young people. And so therefore we're starting a piece of work around what it means to belong in Somerset, and is that the same for everyone, and what it means to be part of Somerset from a young person's perspective. So we've got an event happening on Sunday to do some filming, around that. And LifeBeat were also commissioned by the VRU, the Violence Reduction Unit, to do a piece of work on exclusion. So what is life like if you're excluded from school, and how can we work together as a community in Somerset to make our school and the wider community more inclusive for our young people. So there's a full link there to a full version film, and I think in a minute we can, hopefully, if the filming digital world supports us, we will have a look at a sort of preview of that, and there is a premiere I can send out in an email to you if you want to come along to Taunton Dean Partnership School and actually watch it and meet the people that were involved in the filming. We have a bit of a premiere coming up for that too. So that's a really positive piece of work in highlighting what it feels like if you're excluded, and how we can be more inclusive as a community. And as I mentioned before, you know, we've just come out of senior mental health lead training. So every school now in Somerset pretty much has a designated senior mental health lead, and we've been supporting them in terms of a whole school approach, in terms of promoting and celebrating wellbeing. And we have developed a curriculum for schools. So if you work or are linked to a school, then do come aboard. That training is for free and will be repeated next academic year. And we're about to promote our Celebration e-zine as a framework as well, which will give you some great ideas of all the excellent work that our schools, we have over 100 I think it's about 2/3 of our schools now signed up to the Somerset Wellbeing Framework, so they've been doing some really brilliant work this year. So it's a huge thank you to all those that work hard in school. And this slide is just a summary of that, really, to say on our website, we have a whole host of training that people working with children and young people are welcome to sign up to. Most of our training is free. We have compassionate, mindful resilience. We also do youth mental health first aid. So one of the things I think Joel brought up was around actually being able to look at symptoms when things are going wrong and being able to support around that. So I encourage anyone who's interested in that to come on to that course, because that would speak to that. And so, yeah, and we've also got a community food growing grant that's gone to Somerset Community Foundation around, actually how we nourish ourselves in terms of physically to help us also emotionally. So yeah, thank you very, very much for listening, and happy to take or respond to any questions in the chat. I haven't been following it because I've been concentrating on the slides, but I don't know if anyone wants to read out any questions to me. I'm happy to answer them.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jamila. So what we're going to do, actually, we're going to go on and play the trailer for that for the VRU film, the Violence Reduction Unit film around exclusion, if that's okay. So hopefully it'll work for us, but if not, I have a backup. So let's see what happens.
People's going to schools, obviously they're kicking off, they're being naughty, but they never ask or take a step back and go, why are they acting like that? There must be something going on. There's always a reason behind that behaviour. No one, especially at our age, does that for no reason.
Like, not everyone can just be sat down in a classroom with other kids and just be expected to learn. I can't do that. I don't learn like that.
Mainstream's really good, and it does a really good job for the majority, but there are those people who it didn't work for necessarily.
She didn't feel safe at school. She was adamant she wasn't going back.
Felt left out and let down.
If you're not taking into account the special needs that young person has, you are opening them up to further trauma.
There's too many targets for the teachers to hit, and what they should be doing, especially in primary schools, is developing young people to cope.
And there's not that trust in the school system for most students right now for them to get to that place where they can really tell them what's going on. I think it's going to take a very long time to get to that point for schools, but I do reckon it's reachable if we try, yeah.
Allowing teachers to have the time to just ask if they're okay would be massive.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jamila. That was that was brilliant. Really good to kind of hear that those direct messages coming out from children and young people, and actually about how that guides our work going forward. Right then, so we're going to move swiftly on if we can now, and I'm going to introduce you to Fiona, who's going to talk to us about the school attendance survey. And Fee, can I hand over to you? I believe you want to share the screen.
I'm going to share the screen. Thanks, Steve. Yes. And what's so interesting is that we're hearing some very similar messages from the presentations and the films we've seen so far. And some of those themes are going to be picked up in this survey that I'm just about to show you. So before I share my screen with you, just to let you know that my name's Fiona Furr. I'm the Participation and Engagement Manager at Somerset County Council. And I work with a great team of people and colleagues throughout the council and our local partnerships to make sure that we hear the voice of children and young people, and sometimes their families as well, to help improve the services that we offer in Somerset. And one of the groups of young people that we work with is a group called the Somerset Youth Forum. Any young person aged between 10 and 18 or up to 25, if they have special educational needs and disabilities, can join the Youth Forum. Some of our members are independent. They're just individuals who want to have a say and come along. And some of them represent other groups, including things like youth groups and youth councils and youth forums. and they meet termly, and they look at issues that they think are priorities for children and young people, but they also carry out research and debate on issues that other people identify for them. And they're the young people's arm of the Somerset Safeguarding Children's Partnership. So their voice is heard in reporting to the partnership, and they are the influence and challenge. And this particular survey is a questionnaire rather than a survey, actually, that I'm going to show you, came out of a request by the Somerset Safeguarding Children's Forum to look at some work around school attendance. So to give you a bit of context, in Somerset, we have more suspensions and exclusions than the national average in our schools. We have lower attendance in our schools than the national average. And the correlation of that, unfortunately, is our children attain lower than the national average. So this is a Somerset issue, and this is why we're going to look at this. And before I show it to you, the young people looked at research that had already happened, not just in the UK, but around the world. I think they looked at Australia and America. And they then came up with research that chimed with them most, and they decided to make a questionnaire for young people to fill out about their attendance at school, but rather than calling it an attendance questionnaire, they called it what makes you enjoy school, or what makes you want to go to school and enjoy school. And they also asked that it wasn't a blanket survey. They didn't want it just sent out through newsletters. They felt that some of the questions were quite sensitive, so they wanted workers to be on hand if young people were doing this. So because of that, we've got quite a small sample at the moment. I'm going to show you that, because that takes other people's goodwill if we can't do it. To be there with those young people as they do this work. So hopefully you can all now see. I'm only showing you the raw data because this hasn't finished yet. This hasn't been completed. So whoa, hold on just a second. So the questionnaire has gone out and it's called "What Makes You Want to Go to School?" And so far we have spoken to 76 young people face to face, and these are the emerging findings. So first of all, we obviously asked them their gender. What we didn't ask was for their name or the school they went to, so that they could feel safe about being completely open about their school experience. And you can see we've got slightly more females than males, and a couple have either preferred not to say or identify as being non-binary. And we also have the two largest cohorts of people who've answered being in the secondary age group. Now, this is because we wanted to support this and have those young people be supported. We've gone and done this in youth clubs in the evenings mainly, but we do have a few college age responders, and also just a couple of primary school age responders as well. We'll have to think about how we get more of that balance. And this was only open to young people living in Somerset. What we did find, looking at the research with the young people, is that if you have a special educational need or disability, if you're a young carer, if you have care experience, so if you're in care yourself, or you're a care leaver, or you're being supported through the youth offending services, you're more likely to have problems with your attendance at school. So we have asked in the questionnaire if people identify with any of those characteristics. And at the moment, we don't have anyone who's answered who's supported by the youth offending service, and only one person supported through the care experience. So this current phase of the questionnaire is talking to our colleagues in those services to see how they can help. And the young people also asked what type of education the people who are answering were receiving, and because of that age range, obviously the majority are secondary, and they also did ask if anybody was on a part-time table rather than a full-time table, and so far we only have 4. And then this was the sort of nub of the questionnaire was around attendance. And when the young people were thinking about how to ask this question, they realised that even within the group of people who were doing this work, not all of them could hand on heart say what their percentage attendance is. But I don't know if you know much about attendance, but 95% or higher attendance is considered very good. 90 to 95% is good. Less than 90% is a concern. So if you're less than 90%, almost certainly your parents will be working with, or carers will have been contacted by the school, working with the school. But because we felt that not every young person would know their percentage, some young people said, well, we really only see it on our end of year report, not our end of term report, our end of year report. We gave them room to say not sure but it's good, not sure but it's okay, not sure but it's poor, and also don't know or other. So you can see in terms of attendance, 27 people are in that higher grouping. 18 young people are in the good grouping, but then we have 14 in less than 90%. And in terms of not sure but it's poor, we have 4. And anyone who answered less than 90% or poor was taken to another question, which asked them what they thought, how they thought their attendance might be low, and they could answer from a range of reasons. So they didn't have to just pick one reason here. So you can see that the top reason is I have anxiety and low well-being, followed by I have a medical condition, I feel I can't do some of the work, I find it difficult to behave the way the school wants me to behave, I don't like a teacher or some teachers, I don't like the lessons, I don't like the school environment, and I don't think school are fair or respectful to students. So those were the top answers that the young people who aren't attending are giving for the reasons for their non-attendance. And there were some other bits and pieces taken from this really quite long list. The young people looked at all the research they could find to make sure they covered those reasons in the questionnaire. And I love it when young people write questionnaires and not adults, because this is not a question I would have ever thought of putting into this questionnaire. But they thought, when you wake up on a school day, how do you feel? And pick all the words that most describe your feelings about going to school. This question was for everyone, whether your attendance is good or bad. And likewise, if I had thought about asking that question, I wouldn't necessarily have used some of the words that the young people put in. Some of them I felt were a bit harsh, and some of them were just feelings I wouldn't have thought about at all. And again, a lot of it was from things that they found from the research around attendance. And I have to say, while we're talking about that research, what we also found out was there's very little very, very little research where children and young people themselves are asked about why they don't attend. So parents are asked, schools are asked, educational experts or specialists are asked, but there's very, very little research on children being asked why they find it difficult to attend school. But going back to this question, the biggest response, and when we looked at who responded this, even young people who are saying they are at 95 or above, the biggest response is, I can't be bothered, which is a very odd statement, but it's really, really chimed with young people. They've picked that out straight away. So there's something about when you wake up in the morning and you think, I've got to go to school, the first thought is, I can't be bothered. And then they feel low, they feel anxious, they feel accepting, by which they mean, yes, I know I've got to go. And there were lots of other reasons, but frustrated or angry, failing came up, sad comes up. Unfortunately, the more negative words have been picked out for those feelings that come up. So that's quite a sad thing to see. And then everyone was asked about, what is your attitude about school? They could only pick one answer. So they could pick, it's good, I enjoy going to school. So 12 people have picked that. It's okay, I know I have to go. That acceptance is 40. It's bad, I don't enjoy going and I try to avoid it is 19. One person isn't going to school. And then others, which were really variations on that okay or bad theme when you look at those other answers. And then there was a question at this point about, are there any barriers that stop you from fully enjoying or attending school? Tell us what they are. They didn't have to answer this question, but 51 of the 76 have answered the question. I can show you, again, this is raw data, so I'm really just whizzing through it. But from early analysis of this, it's mainly either because of the other people in the school or the lessons and the teachers. It falls into two categories. And you can see the last two people who did this said moody teachers and falling out with friends. So they've covered both elements. But there's quite a lot there, and there's some really quite lengthy statements from young people in those in that barriers question. So we get to question 11, and we're starting to feel a bit, a little bit despondent, aren't we? This isn't painting a particularly good picture of our children's relationship with their education. But then we ask them, do you feel that your school wants you to achieve your best? And 64%, so 49 of the respondents say yes, they do. And 17 say maybe. And when we've looked at some of the answers, even those who are saying they really don't like school and they're not attending very well, still believe that school wants them to achieve their best. And we also asked if they felt that the school environment feels safe, welcoming and inclusive to everyone. Slightly lower here, 45%, 34 people are saying yes, it does. But unfortunately, 22% are saying no, and then 29% are saying maybe. And the young people also looked at, in the research, some of the research about the social elements of school. So they wanted to include this question about how safe you feel at school. And so 47 of the respondents, so over half, are saying, well, very safe or somewhat safe, which is good. But it's still quite worrying to see that 9 people are somewhat unsafe or very unsafe, and 18 are sitting on the fence and neither feeling one or the other. And then they included a question on how you learn best, because some of the research talks about the difficulties for some people sitting in a classroom. And in fact, in the film that you've just seen, one of the young males there said, I don't like sitting in a classroom. I felt when looking at this, because I did a lot of the interviews with young people, I feel this is a slightly wasted question, because most of the young people I spoke to, their experience is only of sitting in a classroom doing academic work. They were very attracted to the idea of practical work or outdoor or alternative or being able to work from home. But the reality is most of them haven't had that experience. So a lot of people picked a combination of all of these without really understanding or having experienced those other elements. We asked them about their teachers. Teachers featured a lot in the research about building good relationships. Do you like your teachers? Are you helpful? Do they support you? 39% said yes, but unfortunately 25% said no. And 18 said maybe. They sat on the fence. And when they sat on the fence, those that I was speaking to said, well, actually, some teachers are great, some teachers don't care. And that was the theme that we picked up when we looked at the anyone who ticked other and gave the reason for saying other. And again, because the research we looked at showed that stuff that goes on outside of school impacts on you enjoying and attending school. So we put in this question here, are there any issues outside of school that prevent you from enjoying and attending school? And only 17 said yes, 41 said no, but there were some maybes and there were some others. And the others were things around, sometimes it's just the fact that I can cope with what's going on outside, and sometimes I can't, and that affects my attendance. So again, you start to feel a little bit grim having looked at those answers. And then we go on to this question, is getting a good education a priority for you? And as you can see, 76% are saying yes, it is. And when you look at some of the lower attenders and the ones that say they don't enjoy school, they still picked yes. And I think that's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's that understanding, that social understanding and cultural understanding that, your education is your passport, if you like, to what happens to you in your adult life. So they're understanding that it's a priority. But what I think we need to be looking at is, if it is a priority, why is it that school is so difficult for so many young people? And if you look at the question, or the answer to the question, is education a priority for your family or your carers, it goes up even more. So the young people are understanding that it is a priority. I mean, just out of just for interest, really, on this one, 5 people said no, it wasn't, but those were actually the 4 that were in the primary. 3 in the primary group and 2 in the secondary group who were quite a young age, and they were a little bit blasé about it, and they were talking about their male role models in their lives, saying, well, he's got a good job and he's got no GCSEs and I'm going to go and work with him. But I think they were the younger age, and I think the more you go on in school, you start to hear that message about, this is your passport to work. But we did go on further to say, how supported are you at home to attend school? We gave young people some examples about that, and most people said they were very supported or quite supported. Very few people said that they were neither or not at all supported. And then, interestingly, looking at some of the slides that Jamila presented, we had already looked at research around young people and the way they feel, the way they look at school and the pressure there. So do you feel under pressure about the way you look at school? And unfortunately, 46% of all these respondents have said, yes, we do. We do. And 16% are saying maybe we do. So we know that's important, and not helped by social media either, where some of the online bullying is about how people look. How am I doing, Steve, for time? Am I nearly done?
We were a bit tight for time, I'm afraid, Fee, if that's okay.
Well, I won't go on, because you've seen the main part of the content here. We do cover bullying as well, and we also ask for ideas about how people might want to enjoy school, how we can help them. So in terms of what's next, the young people are going to look at this and do some analysis and think about what they've heard and decide who they think might need to see it. If you've got any ideas as to who might need to see this information, please put it in the chat. We do have a young person's champion for the Children and Young People's Plan. Education features very highly on the plan. So that young person, Dan, has already started doing analysis around this. And also, if you work with any young people who like to have a voice and have opinions about what it's like to be in Somerset and the services they receive, please let me know. Please get in touch with me, because we're always happy to welcome more young people to the Youth Forum.
It's lovely to hear from you, Fee, and all the work that's taking place. And yeah, early kind of days with it, isn't it? But it's really good to sort of see those initial findings starting to come out. And again, the more we can hear directly from children and young people, the better, really, to really try and understand actually how we can support best. So,
totally.
Thank you so much. I haven't seen any. Oh, there are some questions that have just popped up in chat now, Fee, if that's okay. So if I can leave you to have a look at the chat as we continue on, and if there's anything you're able to respond to in there, that'd be brilliant. So thank you so much for that, Fee. Right then, we've got one more presentation to go through this afternoon, but before we do, it's time to really make sure we're going to get your input going through. And for anybody who managed to join us on the Monday Forum event, you'll know, as we talked about there, it's so important that we use these webinars taking place throughout the Forum weeks to make sure we're kind of getting your ideas, your thoughts, your suggestions. And for anybody who didn't make it there, on Monday, we have the Forum Legacy Group, whose role it is really to take the questions and the themes that come up throughout events like today, and really kind of drive that agenda forward to try and look to improve things. So what we've got is continuing on the Menti. Hopefully you're still logged into the Menti, but if not, you'll see it there, and my colleague will pop it in the chat for you again in a second. But if you're still logged on before, that's absolutely fine. And I've moved the question on here. And what I'd like you to do as we're going through the next presentation is just have a think and jot down any ideas you've got about what you feel are some of the biggest issues and barriers to successfully supporting children and young people's mental health in Somerset. We're not asking you to be an expert. You don't have to be an expert. Just what your kind of gut feeling is or what your experiences are. If you're able to put in there what agency you're from, that would be really helpful, just kind of allowing us to pick through it and see if actually there's any themes coming up in terms of the partnership there. But so that's the first question. I will, about halfway through the presentation, move that question on. So keep an eye on your phone there. And the second question will be just what's your takeaway from today's session? What are you going to be able to take away from today's session into your agency and how you're going to do that. But I'll change that slide about halfway through as we go through. So to begin with, really just the question of actually what are the biggest issues and barriers from your perspective that we can help and work together to improve the situation for children and young people. So as you think about that, as we go through that, we're going to introduce now our final speaker from today, Kate Gallagher, who's going to talk to us about some of the work that is taking place to support schools and support children and young people's mental health. So Kate, if it's okay, I will hand over to you. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, my name's Kate Gallagher. I'm a mental health nurse and I am the clinical lead for the mental health in schools team in Somerset. So yeah, it's exciting to be able to talk about some of the things that are happening for children and young people across Somerset. And one of those things is the mental health in schools team. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what that is. So if you've got any questions or anything, then obviously pop them in the chat and I'll try and answer those the best I can. So I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview really of what the mental health in schools team is, because some of you may or may not know. So it's Somerset was nominated to be a Trailblazer site in 2019 as part of the Green Paper for transforming children and young people's mental health. So we've come, obviously we've all been through the pandemic, so we've hit some bumps in the road along that, trying to set up a team across Somerset, but at the moment we're continuing to trailblaze on and continue to make an impact, which is great. The mental health support teams, they have three core functions, and that's to deliver evidence-based interventions for mild to moderate mental health issues, and to support the senior mental health leads in each school. As Jamila's mentioned, we've been doing some senior mental health lead training. We're working on the basis that all schools will have a mental health lead. So our role is to support and work with those senior mental health leads across all of the schools and help to introduce and develop their whole school approach, as well as giving advice to schools and liaising with external specialists and services, just to try and help young people get to the right support that they need. So we do a lot of signposting and a lot of trying to understand what the concerns are for that young person and then try and get them the right support and avoid as much as possible bouncing around different services. So in Somerset, so there are lots of MHSTs across the county. So this is our model. So in Somerset, we have what's called a tri-model. So we're working with Young Somerset and we're working with the NHS, with Somerset Foundation Trust, so the CAMS within CAMS, and working very closely with Somerset County Council, so the Ed Psych Service, Public Health and the Education Service. So I'm just, in case you don't know, so our MHST has worked across mainly the Young Somerset. So we have the people that are employed in the mental health and schools team either are employed through Young Somerset or they're employed through the NHS. So how we fit into Young Somerset, which is now quite a big organisation. So we are part of, we employ EMHPs, which is educational mental health practitioners, and we support the Young Somerset service wider by fitting into their mental health and wellbeing element. So they, the Young Somerset service, we work really closely with their CWP, so which is the Children's Wellbeing Practitioners, and they're all offering a very similar service to what we are. They get trained in low intensity CBT, and they do lots of group work and whole school approach work. So it fits really well into what is a growing Young Somerset service. So this is just to give an example of the difference. So in Young Somerset, they've got CWPs, which is the community wellbeing practitioners, and then we've got educational mental health practitioners. So these are specifically for working in schools, the EMHPs, and those are the ones that work within the mental health schools team. So they're able to deliver the low intensity CBT. So they go off to university, they get trained for a whole year. So it's a very slow process. They come out into schools. In fact, they're just coming out into schools now, having been into university for 6 months. And they'll gradually build up a caseload until the end of their course by the end of the year, and then they'll be qualified practitioners. And they work in school all year round, so we can support young people not just in term time. And we're developing our whole school approach because of COVID as well. It's kind of put a little bit of a that's taken just a bit more time to get going, but they're starting to offer small groups work and targeted work and assemblies and staff training. And we've also got some assistant practitioners within Young Somerset who support the mental health support team as well. So it's growing. And then we've got how MHST fits into the Somerset Foundation Trust. So I fit within CAMS, so I'm a CAMS clinician. I've worked in CAMS for a long time. So the NHS side of the mental health and schools team, we just fit into the early interventions offer. So we've been working really hard within CAMS to get that offer, well, just better really, for young people, and trying to get support to young people quicker, and getting the right support to them, because CAMS isn't just specialist CAMS. There's lots more to the children mental health service than just specialist CAMS. So we've got, as I've listed here, lots of different services. But the early intervention part of that, which is the bit that we're really hoping that is going to make the difference, we're really working hard, and we've got so many passionate staff to try and make a difference to young people so that they don't need all these other services and all the other specialist services. We want to try and get them helped earlier so that they develop skills and understand their mental health better. So we've got the single point of access service in CAMS, which is where all lots of referrals, mainly the referral access point for all of these other services. And then we fit in there as the mental health schools team. So we sit at a sort of a tier 2 level. We accept referrals directly into us, not through the SPA team, but we work really closely with SPA. And then some of you may or may not know, but we've also got a tier 2+ team within CAMS early intervention service as well, which is working with those young people who maybe need slightly longer than what we can offer, and maybe are slightly higher risk, or maybe a bit more complex than what our practitioners can work with. And this is really good because it means that we're linking really closely with other CAMS clinicians and teams as well, so we can seek advice and support internally to get the young people to the right place at the right time. So this is just to give an overview of the MHST team. So we've got managers in Young Somerset and line managers in Young Somerset who oversee the EMHPs, lots of acronyms. And then we've got managers within CAMS. So that's myself, I cover the West, and then we've got Thomas Ely, who covers the east of the county. And then we've got Dave Smith, who is our operational manager. And then in Young Somerset, there's various levels of management within the team as well. We've got admin, as I'm sure any of you know. Admin are absolute well, we can't do without them. They're amazing. So we've got an excellent admin team now who keep us all on our toes. We've got senior mental health practitioners, and I've put stroke supervisors because we have to send our practitioners on a year's training as well. So they have to train to be supervisors for the EMHPs. So our senior mental health practitioners are generally nurse background, social work background, OT background. So they come from have a core profession, and they're based within the NHS service. So that's where Thomas and I will then oversee them. And their role is really varied. So although they supervise the EMHPs, they also will liaise really closely with the mental health leads in schools, and offer loads of various support to schools. So then we've got the qualified EMHP. So those are the practitioners who have done and completed their training. And then we've got trainee EMHPs who are currently doing their university support. And we've got more trainees going to be starting with us later on in the year, and they'll start their year's training. So we're continuing to grow and expand the team and the service, and hope that we can reach more young people across the county. And then we're really lucky to have a whole school approach coordinator. This is something that we're, again, really passionate about, working with public health and the education system to really embed mental health. So it kind of fits with all of the things that we've been talking about today, about really kind of changing the just the whole, creating a mentally healthy school really in every area. So working with parents. So we often will do parent workshops, just general parent information sessions. We'll do targeted intervention sessions, but also assemblies to all young people. So not those young people that are identified as maybe struggling, but actually all young people, and trying to educate them about their mental health and helping them to understand that they have mental health and that they need to look after it, essentially. So really working hard on the whole school approach. And I've talked about the courses. So that's us as a team. So this is who we work with. So we started in 2019. So we've come in waves. So we originally started working with the Taunton and Mendip area, and we work closely with the PRUs. So Yeah, so these numbers might be slightly more than that actually, but we're basically working with quite a lot of secondary schools. So we work with 5 to 16-year-olds across the county, and we work with a number of primary schools, often the ones that are closely linked to the secondary schools that we're working in as well. And we're also working with some of the special schools as well. And then we've started working with Sedgemoor and South Somerset last year, which is working really well. And again, working closely with the secondary and primary schools. And now we're also looking at expanding to West Somerset and Frome at some point. That's our plan once we can get more EMHPs trained and yeah, spread out across the county a bit further. So yeah, we're basically county-wide. We're not in all schools at the moment, but we are yeah, working with a number, particularly of the secondary schools in each of the areas. This is just to give a little overview of what we can and can't work with. So obviously every service will have a remit and they'll have what they can kind of are commissioned or trained to work with. So our EMHPs are trained in low intensity CBT. So it's really quite prescriptive. They get trained in 8 interventions. So when we get a referral, we really have to think about will that young person benefit from one of those 8 interventions that they've been trained in. So we have to be really careful and make sure that we are the right service for them, like any other service really. So it's mainly working with young people with mild to moderate anxiety, low mood, panic. So it kind of gives you an overview of what sort of the mental health problems that we can work with. So it's that low level where it's just kind of a young person might be showing that they're struggling, and this is where we're trying to work with getting teachers a bit more I guess trained in mental health, so that they can just notice those signs and we can get in there really early so that they can then hopefully be a bit more motivated and able to work with our practitioners so that we can really give them some skills and tools to help them with their mental health. And you know, as we know, mental health is on a continuum. So some days it'll be good, some days it won't be so good. And actually what we want to do is help them to be able to manage it on good days and not so good days and recognise when they're struggling. So the earlier we can get in there, the better. And better outcomes for that young person longer term as well. Again, this is just to give you an overview of what we can offer. So when we've really kind of, because we're still developing as services do, you know, we're relatively new still in terms of a service. And we, as I've said at the beginning, we've had lots of bumps in the road. We've had lots of staff come, lots of staff go. As you can imagine, it can be a challenge. But what we've got to is actually being able to have a really good offer for young people across Somerset and their families and schools. So we work really closely with the Educational Psychology Service, and they are able to offer mental health lead supervision, so which is an amazing offer and not something that we've really had in Somerset before, where teachers are able to go and talk about some of the challenges that they're having and have supervision, actual supervision, which is just incredible. And we're hoping that we're going to be able to continue to offer that. We do offer consultations and we offer what we call consideration list check-ins with our mental health leads to look at the young people that they're looking at referring in. So we're having lots of conversations with teachers and mental health leads in schools just to try and get the young people the right help at the right time. We work closely with public health to look at the wellbeing audit and ensure that schools signed up, and we can help them to work towards getting more greens on their wellbeing audit. So identifying the things that they're struggling with, and then we look at what we can do to help support that. And we work with the EPs on their path, which is another audit tool. So then below are just some of the examples really of things that we can offer, which is staff sessions. So looking at mental health awareness and also signposting. So, you know, we might not do the mental health first aid, but we can signpost to, and let people know when courses are available. But we can also run our own mental health awareness sessions, emotion coaching, staff wellbeing and resilience. Something that's coming up more and more actually post-COVID is around staff wellbeing, and actually schools are taking this as a real priority and not just being a bit of a tick box exercise, actually wanting to invest and really embed a better staff wellbeing policy across their schools. So we're working really hard to support schools to get that better. And as I said, sort of assemblies, parent support. So we're really lucky to be able to offer tuning into kids and tuning into teens. So that's aside to what our EMHPs offer for some of the parenting interventions. Yeah, that's what our wellbeing whole school approach coordinator runs. And she links really well with the PFSAs, and there's lots of people already trained across the county. So if you knew anybody that has done the tuning into kids and teens training, but they're not sure about how to get a group going, then we would support that PFSA or whoever's trained to get that going. Yeah, and group work, and we're looking at peer mentoring programs as well. So we've got lots to offer, as well as our one-to-one support, which is a big bulk of the work as well. Yeah, so process exclamation mark. So we've done a lot of trying to work out our processes, and we're starting up a new service and then trying to embed that and introduce that into schools has been quite a challenge at times, because you can't change a process too quickly because it's just very confusing. So we feel like we've got to a better point now, and we've got much better relationships with schools and the mental health lead. So whereas last year we used to hold big waiting lists in service, what we're doing now is we get our schools to hold what we call a consideration list. So they basically hold a list of young people that they're thinking, oh, actually, I think this young person might be suitable for the mental health and schools team. And then what our senior mental health practitioners and EMHPs will do is they'll meet with that mental health lead regularly to discuss those lists and think about, is that young person right for the service? And if so, then we'll look at when there's opportunities to offer interventions, then we can get them to put the referral in. And if we're not too sure, then we can look at signposting. So they're not just sat on a waiting list and going nowhere. We're looking at making sure that young people are signposted elsewhere if it's not for us, as quickly as possible. And then, yeah, when an EMHP has capacity, then the school will make a referral. So a request for help form will come into the mental health and schools team inbox, and then we look at triaging that, and then we allocate out to our practitioners. And then the practitioners will assess, and then they will look at offering an intervention from their intervention list. Or we might then consider that that young person might benefit from some group work, or work out what we think is best for them. So that's kind of just a bit of an overview of what was quite a complex process, but we think we've nailed it a bit now. So this is just to give you a lot of boxes, but an example of the referral routes for school. And again, this has been quite complex because we're fitting ourselves into what are already existing services. So CAMS has got their own, lots of services, Young Somerset have, and then the external services as well. So, and then trying to help schools to not have to be any more complicated than it needs to be. So we've got, we basically, if it's an MHST school and you think it's for a young person to enter into the MHST, then we would look at having those conversations with the mental health lead, and we would accept that referral once agreed. And anything that's not MHST or is above MHST, then it would go into SPA. So any other referral will go into our single point of access team, and then they will look at the right service for them if that young person needs to maybe go with Tier 2+, or whether they need to go into specialist CAMS. So yeah, just talking a bit more about the whole school approach really, and how that fits in with the MHST. This is just to give show that we're working alongside public health really and the framework. So we work really closely with schools to make sure that they are just going through all of these, ticking all these boxes really, and any areas that they don't feel like they're doing very well on, then we can really look at what we can do to boost that and support that. And we're putting, as I said earlier, we're putting a lot of energy into whole school approach work, because yes, one-to-one work is really important and we will continue to offer one-to-one work, but actually this is also really important and we really want to get this right for schools. So just an overview really. So we accept young people with mild to moderate mental health concerns only from the mental health lead in school. So we would accept a referral. We would encourage anybody within the school system to, if they thought that a young person might benefit from getting support from the mental health and support team. But we would always want that referral to come through the mental health lead. So that mental health lead has got a really good overview of the young people that are being highlighted as maybe needing support, and then they're able to keep a track of those young people then as well, and we can liaise better. So we offer evidence-based low intensity CBT interventions, and MHST staff work really closely with schools. So we're really, now that we're able to get back into schools, it's so much easier to make those relations and not have to do everything over Teams. So going in, having meetings with schools, putting boards up in schools, working alongside the ed psychs. This has just been amazing for us because we've learned so much working with them on the senior mental health lead training, but also just learning about how we can work closer with schools and the education system. We're offering supervision to school staff, so we do this in a consultation way, as I've said earlier, which again is really vital, and they need that time to talk about some young people, but also not necessarily talk about young people, talk about staff and as I've said, working with schools to develop a mentally healthy school. And we're also looking at what training opportunities we can put in place for staff and parents. So that might be parents' information sessions, but also bespoke training opportunities. So if, for example, in a school, they're really struggling with anxiety or young people struggling to get into school, then we can look at whether or not there's something that we can put in place for that. And that goes in with the whole school approach work. That's just kind of a very brief overview of MHST.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kate. I'm just having a look at the chat, and there's a couple of questions that popped up about provision for children and young people who may not be in school, and those that might not pop up on the school radar, or maybe who are electively home educated, and kind of the ability to access support.
Yeah, so this is an area that we're looking at. So we want to be able to look at those young people that are electively home educated or are not in school for certain reasons, and this is something that at some point we will look at supporting. At the moment, that wouldn't necessarily be through the MHST unless that young person's on roll. But we're a schools-based service, so if young people aren't accessing school, they could potentially access Young Somerset for that similar sort of level of support.
Thanks, Kate. It's interesting, and it's as I've talked a few times about over this week. This is about really getting people's thoughts, ideas, kind of recognising those potential barriers and how we overcome those. And that is one of those themes that has come up throughout the week. So yeah, definitely something we'll be picking up on. Thank you. The other question as well is it's just from Michelle about, can the peer mentoring be for post-16 as well as primary and secondary?
Well, we only work with up to 16, but absolutely, we'd be happy to share anything like that. So we've developed, I don't know if any of you will remember, but we had the SHARE project where we did wellbeing champions. So we trained up wellbeing champions. And we've got lots of resources. So if we're not working with young people in your setting or a school that you're working with, we're always happy to share resources. So if you think it's something that you would like to look at and embed somehow, then very happy to share.
Fantastic, thank you. There's a very affirmative yes please exclamation marks in the chat. So brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. So right then, so it's been a jam-packed afternoon, and just to say we are nearing the end of it now, and thank you so much for those of you who have inputted into the Mentimeter that we've had going. Had some really interesting responses come into us as well. I'm just going to do a very, very quick review of some of those themes. Again, this is live, so apologies, I'm kind of reading it as we go here, but some of those sort of common themes that are coming up here. One about kind of accessing the right services, and I think one of the themes that has come in throughout the week are kind of knowledge about what's out there and how to access it, and kind of what the service criteria are, thresholds, and actually what those referral routes in, and how to kind of get the right support for the right young person for the right time. So again, that's something certainly we'll be picking up on here. And time from schools there, and actually the pressures and the expectations on schools. And I think for me, it's very much about how do we all come together to support each other as part of the partnership? How do we all support each other to make sure we can support children and young people here? But yeah, need to kind of recognise that as well, those times and those pressures on schools here. A bit here about social media. Again, awareness around what's out there for children and young people. So we will be picking up on all of those as we go through. And I say part of the Forum Legacy Group remit is kind of really plough through all of these and kind of pick out those themes, those commonalities within this. And then just in terms of the takeaway from today, lots there about the resources and what is available. And if you missed it in the chat, if you're kind of sitting there thinking, oh, I want to know more about what's out there, say hopefully next week or possibly the week after, depending on how much editing we've got to go on there, we will be posting all the videos from this Forum week up online on our Forum page there, which we'll post a link for in the chat in just a second. And the Tuesday session was jam-packed with loads of services that are available to children and young people in Somerset. So if you didn't manage to catch this live on Tuesday, do go back and watch that. It will be kind of broken up into chapters as well, so you can go directly to the services that are available for you. So yeah, do have a look at that, because I say that is a common thing that comes up. Lots of positivity there about the work of the Youth Parliament and Joel's work here, which is great to see. Yeah, really inspiring and really interesting to be able to kind of, again, work together from everybody that we've heard from today about to kind of really drive that agenda. So so thank you so much for that. That will be up live until the end of this webinar here. So if you have got anything you want to add to it, please do. It's not too late to do that. But also just building on about hearing from you, additional to all that, and we will be emailing out after today as well. We've put together a questionnaire based on today. It's a very short survey. It will take you about 5 minutes at the most, really just trying to get your additional voices and some of your thoughts within that. And I say it's not just that we're just kind of going to do a survey for the sake of it. We're really going to be taking the answers, the responses to that, and we will be looking through those as a Forum Legacy group and really picking out those themes, those ideas. So please, it really would be valuable to us if you could just spend a bit of time going through that survey after today while it's still fresh in your head, even better. And if you can scan the QR code there, or if not, my colleagues popped that into the chat for you to answer. But please, we really want to capture your thoughts. So that is it from today, but just as a little plug, just to say, if you've not joined us on our social medias, please do on our Facebook and Twitter accounts. We've got loads of information that we post on there. And most importantly as well, if you're not signed up to our news bulletin, there is a link there for you. Do kind of join up to our news bulletin. We've got a monthly free news bulletin that goes out to you, really giving you those key bits of information, key updates to keep you up to date with your knowledge at all times. And we will be doing a bit of feedback from today's and this week's session as well for you. Just very quickly to say, if you're from an education setting and you've just migrated from an old Eduke email address to a new email address, you do need to re-register to be able to keep on receiving the updates from the news bulletin. So that is it from today. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you so much to all of our guest presenters that we've had come in and provide a real diverse kind of aspects in terms of listening to voices of children and young people. It's been absolutely fascinating and invaluable to hear that. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you can join us tomorrow. Thank you very much. Take care. Have a good rest of the afternoon, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.